Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to this webinar on Net Zero Heroes. Very excited to share this report that the CLASP team has put together. And it's mind-boggling findings, eye-popping findings, I might say. So welcome to this discussion. We have an esteemed group of panelists for this discussion. The rough agenda will be that Christine will present the findings of the report at first, so she will lead, and then we will invite the other panelists to come in, provide their own opinions and their point of view from the industries that they serve. Before we go into that, I'd just like to take a few moments to introduce myself, make some opening remarks, and then introduce the panelists. So I am Joyita Mukherjee. I'm on the board of CLASP. Before I joined CLASP, I have been working with multilateral development agencies, primarily the International Finance Corporation and the World Bank. I have been in the field of climate finance for well over a decade, going on 15 years at this point. And that's basically my specialty, working on blended finance and climate finance. So that's all about me. The reason I'm excited about this discussion is that as you know, we move through the next few years and our 1.5 degree target seems ever elusive and ever urgent, it is always good to have beacons of hope. And I think this report is one of them. The reason I said some of the results and findings are eye-popping is because I personally was surprised to understand what a force and powerful pathway efficiency of appliances can be. They represent roughly 40% of energy-related emissions in the globe. And this is a sector that's going to be growing as we move towards more just energy transition and equal access for all. So it's a very powerful tool whose time is here and now. That's my belief, and that's why I think this report is so important. So wonderful job, you guys. I will segue to bringing the panelists on so you can hear a little bit about them and introduce themselves. And we will finally land on Christine, who will tell us a little bit about herself and then go into the findings of the report. So my fellow panelists, Axum, if you could go first, and then we'll go to Duncan, and then Christine, and then Christine Eibs, and then Oliver, and then to Christine Egan. So without any further ado, Axum, you're on.
Thank you, Joyita, and happy to be joining my fellow panelists here today. I'm Axum Teferra. I am with the Clean Cooling Collaborative, and we are an initiative out of ClimateWorks Foundation focused on curbing emissions from the cooling sector while increasing access to energy-efficient, climate-friendly cooling technologies and techniques. And my background is primarily in building decarbonization with various government institutions. Thank you. Look forward to talking.
Thanks, Axum.
Hello.
Go on.
Sorry, I jumped right in. Hi, everyone. My name is Duncan Gibb, and I'm with the Regulatory Assistance Project, or RAP. RAP is active on multiple continents, but mainly in the US and Europe, where I'm based. We work on all different aspects of clean energy policy, from electricity market regulation to clean heating in buildings, which is my main focus. Personally, I spend a lot of my time crunching numbers on clean heat and look at policies to advance the uptake of heat pumps in buildings around Europe and beyond. So very happy to be here, and congrats to the CLASP team on this excellent report.
Thanks, Duncan. Christine Eibs, you're next.
Good day, everyone, and pleased to be joining you here. And it's always nice to have another Christine on the line. So hi, Christine Egan. Christine Eibs, and I'm currently the program director for the SHINE campaign, which is focused at the intersection of energy access, gender, and climate justice. And we specifically look at scaling women and community-led, decentralized renewable energy solutions, which deliver both equality and climate solutions. I've spent the last 30 years focused on energy enterprise development at the intersection of public and private finance, and really see a lot of hope, as I've said at the beginning, in this report, and applaud the CLASP team for its elevation of these heroes, and look forward to discussing it further.
Thank you, Christine. And now to Oliver.
Thanks, Joyita. Hi, everyone. Really great to be on this panel. I lead the energy work at Consumers International. We are the global membership organization for independent consumer advocacy organizations all around the world. We bring together over 200 rather, member organizations in over 100 countries. And we are their voice at international fora. And on energy, our program focuses on showing that consumers have rights and responsibilities. They can be a partner in the energy transition, but also we need to highlight the essential shifts from business and government and point to how we can constructively build that enabling system with and for consumers. So really fantastic to be on this panel at an important report launch.
Thank you, Oliver. Very nice.
Yes.
You're on, Christine.
Indeed. Great. Thanks. Well, I'll take a moment to introduce myself and just say that I have the pleasure of being the CEO of CLASP, a job that I have had for close to 24 years. I get to work with an incredible team of people who have a vision for how to make the world a better place and people's lives better through appliances, lighting, and equipment. It's a real pleasure. This report was particularly sort of came to fruition and came to concept through some brainstorming of really the nature of appliances, lighting, and equipment is really these sort of unsung heroes in our lives. These unsung heroes in the path to climate mitigation, and unsung heroes is we deliver energy access, adaptation, and resilience to those who are going to be most significantly impacted by climate change. And so we thought, how can we construct a narrative that tells the power, the ubiquity, the power, the potential, the necessity of these appliances in an ever-changing world, drives an agenda of ambition and creates focus and momentum, and puts both that mitigation and that adaptation and resilience narrative in the same place, because they're often underappreciated and talked about, yet in very distinct mechanisms. And so that is the vision of this paper. It is 2 years in the making. I will give a shout out to a few of the authors, Ari Reeves, Matt Malinowski, Lauren Boucher, and a ton of reviewers who've helped us really bring this paper to light. Great work by the comms team. And so It's really something that we hope frames the dialogue, headed to the COP, really puts in focus this incredibly practical, incredibly important solution set as we try to drive towards momentum and drive towards 1.5 degrees. And so with that, I think we can move to the slides and talk a little bit about the key findings. I think what's really essential, just as a starting place, is that we take these appliances, these devices that provide energy, provide service, provide end uses, they provide lighting, they provide cooling. We really sort of take them for granted, but they are cornerstones of our life. They are essential for our well-being. They are essential for our productivity. And that is only becoming more intensely true in a world that is increasingly affected by climate change and global warming and its associated hazards. So they are ubiquitous, they are everywhere, they are necessary, and increasingly so. Next slide. I think one of the things we really talked about when we took this paper, and even surprised those of us who've worked for so long in this field, is that when you look at the devices, they are responsible for a surprising amount, almost 40% of energy-related CO2 emissions. That's equivalent to the emissions of China, Europe, and Brazil. Those are all very significant emitters in CLASP's top 20 for our sector. What we have essentially done in this chart, I mean, one of the first things we've done is we've taken the power plants out. We've looked at what do the power plants supply? What are the devices and the pieces of equipment in the commercial sector, in the industrial sector, including biomass and fossil fuels for cooking and heating. And when you total all of that up, all of these devices that we're using, you get a situation where we're looking at an astonishing amount of climate impact. And so clearly the importance of ensuring that this climate footprint is minimized and that we are on track to making it as climate friendly as possible is critically important. Next slide. So what we did in this research, which is that we took a look at the IEA Net Zero by 50 report. Within that report, every sector, including the appliance sector, is given a renewable energy budget to remain on task. 50-50 shot of a 1.5 degree scenario as an outcome, but within that shot, you are given a renewable energy budget. Ours, for our sector, is 82 exajoules. And what we have found when we look at that sector through our modeling is that actually from a business as usual perspective, if you take, for example, 2020 policies and levels of efficiency on the books in governments around the world, we are not on track. In fact, we will be significantly exceeding that renewable energy budget. But what we found that I think, frankly, was surprising to us and even me as a long-term person is that even if you take our global benchmarks, even if you look at things like World's Best Maps, the U4E model regulations, that when you look at those global benchmarks, which are the things we're saying we should be pursuing, we still exceed that 82 exajoules by about 98 exajoules in 2050. And so one of the fundamental conclusions of this report is that we need more ambitious goalposts, that as a community, the benchmarks that we are pursuing today need to be more ambitious. We need to be deploying this tool to even higher levels of ambition and minimized impact. Next slide. This is just the same information, but now we're taking a CO2 perspective rather than that exajoules perspective. Again, the assumption here is that if we don't remain within that renewable energy budget, that has certain assumptions of how fast renewables can grow, we are likely to meet this excess demand with dirty fossil fuels. In that scenario, in a big business as usual, appliances would overshoot by about 9 gigatons of CO2 cumulatively in 2050. And again, even that benchmark scenario, the things we're pursuing today and saying, this is where we need to be going for policy in X, Y, or Z country for A, B, or C technology, still overshoot by about 7.1 gigatons. And so what we have done is to say, wow, this is really a very significant climate impact. This is something that is, I think, underappreciated in the community, and it really says something to where we need to go to get to our higher and higher levels of ambition. Next slide, please. At the same time, We talk about the mitigation potential, and maybe we don't appreciate how big it is and how much we have to do. But what we really underappreciate is that there are billions of people who do not own the appliances that they need to live healthy, productive lives. And many of those countries actually intersect with those that are most at risk for the dangers of climate change. There are about 3.6 billion people who live in regions that are highly vulnerable to climate change. And so we have this footprint that we need to minimize for this product serving incredibly and delivering incredibly valuable services, and that we still have more people who are entitled, who need to gain access to these. So we have a complicated map of trying to solve two problems at the same time and really bring both into focus to make that change happen. Next slide, please. Just to say, what does this look like for a couple of the products? This is a map adapted from SE for All's Chilling Prospects report. It depicts air conditioner and fan access for high-risk populations in rural and urban poor for 45 high countries and 22 regions that are not considered high impact. One of the things that this report concludes is that over 1.2 billion people are at high risk because they do not have access to a fan or a refrigerator. I think it's also astonishing to point out that there are 2.4 billion in the lower and middle income group who are at medium risk. We are approaching half the population for whom there is a risk of lack of access to cooling in a warming world. And so this is clearly a challenge, and we need to people need to gain access to cooling and fans, to air conditioners and fans. I think it's interesting to go back one more time, sorry. I think it's interesting to tell a little bit of this story at the individual country level. You can look at a country like India, it's pretty blue. I think that's the 70 to 80%, right? And you could maybe look at that and say, oh, wow, that's pretty good. A large chunk have access to cooling, right? But there are over 1.4 billion people in India. And so that is still an astonishing 323 million people at high risk. That's equivalent to the population of the United States in India due to access to cooling. So we have a long way to go for this incredibly important technology. And it's one of the reasons we chose to highlight this one in the presentation. Next slide. Electric cooking. Many of us have heard, and I know, Duncan, you're probably a big part of the electrify everything. Cooking is going to be one of the most challenging and most necessary areas. Only 15% of the world's population uses electricity as their primary fuel for cooking, despite the fact that there are substantial health benefits to doing so. In some place like South America, Brazil, the switch to electric cooking would mean moving from LPG gas to electricity with reductions in NOx pollution that comes with improvements in health, for example, limiting heart disease. In most of sub-Saharan Africa, we're talking about moving from fuel and biomass with incredible benefit to women and children. Huge equity issues here for the particulate matter that comes in homes and the indoor pollution that people suffer. So these are just a couple of the technologies that we've chosen to focus on. Within the report, we go technology by technology, looking at the gaps. The gaps are substantial for all of our net zero heroes. We know that there is an inadequate presence and inadequate availability of these appliances, lighting, and equipment. And so that is one of the challenges we have to tackle while also tackling climate change. Next slide. There's a clear pathway. It's the pathway that we lay out in the Net Zero Heroes. We have identified these 10 appliances and an unprecedented push that we are calling for on a global basis. Next slide, please. So you see here that same chart. There's a set of recommendations in the report, and when you look at those recommendations and what they would get us, you see that from an exajoules basis, they start to get us within range. They get us within 21 exajoules if we were to implement the policies recommended. We start to be within that renewable energy envelope. The goal here is that, and the idea here is that with behavior change, with increased building efficiency, we think we can actually close that gap, but it is also the only scenario that puts this in reach. And so that's one of the first messages that we need, is that pursuing these net zero hard targets at this level of ambition puts these goals within reach. Next slide, please. Again, this one just looks at it from a CO2 basis. You see, again, on a straight CO2 basis, only the net zero hero policies bring us within range. Again, we are very close. We still need to close a gap with behaviors and improve the building envelope. Next slide, please. I want to talk a little bit about a couple of the technologies and what this means. What are we calling for? LED lighting is a great example. We just got a very significant global win at COP5 in the Minamata Convention. The elimination of the exception for mercury, compact fluorescent, and fluorescent lighting were eliminated. By 2027. There will be a phase out of fluorescent lighting. And if you look at what we're calling for here, we're saying that's great. And to really maximize around our net zero heroes and lighting and potential, we need to pull that transition date, that phase out date forward to 2025. We need to get the tiny little bit of incandescent lighting, notably even recently in the US market, there were incandescent light bulbs on the market. Those need to go away. And then LED lighting, which has been the workhorse, and done so much to increase the efficiency of the lighting sector and minimize its climate footprint. We still need to keep working there and double the luminous efficacy of new LEDs by 2030, taking advantage of rapid technological improvement. The mitigation numbers in these product slides are annual in 2050. Obviously, if you multiply those cumulatively, they're much more significant. But I should also note that each of these changes has other benefits. When you illuminate compact fluorescent lighting, you eliminate millions of tons of mercury pollution from the breakage and disposal. There's reduced waste streams. So there are tons of co-benefits to doing this. But the point here is to say, even with the amazing progress that we've made to really maximize on this technology and sector, we need to push harder and push farther, push faster. Next technology, please. Next slide. I've talked about air conditioners. This is another example. The call in the paper is to double the efficiency of new air conditioner units. That is going to obviously mean different things for different countries. Countries' levels of efficiency right now are in very different places. For example, the world's best maps is in China, actually, and it is a CSPF of 6.1. When we call for a doubling, I'm just going to call out a country like India, for example. There, the standard is at 3.5. So we know they could go to that doubling of efficiency, right? Those Chinese levels are achievable within the Indian context. The technology is available, and it is this sort of increased ambition that we're calling on policymakers in countries around the world to try to achieve, to maximize, again, the potential reduction, the climate minimization from this sector. For other countries like China, to go from 6.1 to 12, you're talking about new technology, new innovation. And so I'm really glad for initiatives like the Global Cooling Prize, which is demonstrating even higher efficiencies. I'm sure maybe Axum will talk a little bit about that initiative. And these are really incredibly important initiatives to increase and drive what's technologically possible, because within some of our technology areas, what we need to get to is not currently widely available in the market. Next slide, please. That's true for refrigerator freezers as well. To double the efficiency of refrigerators and freezers right now, we need a bit of technological improvement there as well. I believe we're currently at the ability to do about 1.6, not quite a doubling. However, refrigerators are a product where over years and years and years, we've had dramatic improvements in the efficiency, dramatic improvements in being able to deliver refrigerants for even lower kilowatt hours. And we need to keep turning that crank to improve the efficiency. Again, with incredible benefits. Just telling here the story of the other benefits. As you improve the efficiency, you improve the affordability. That means more people can get access to these appliances, lighting, and equipment. Next slide, please. I'm not going to go into all of these, largely because I'm out of time, but I want to be very clear that for each of the technologies, comfort fans, next slide, please. Heat pumps, next slide, please. Heat pump water heaters, industrial motors, electric cooking, televisions, and solar water pumps. We have a target. We have an ambitious set of policies, an ambitious target of where we need to go, a recommendation for what policymakers should be doing, for what manufacturers should and shouldn't be producing, what the donor community should and shouldn't be investing in. If we meet these targets, if we pursue this higher level ambition, we estimate there would be 9.2 gigatons of CO2 relative to the baseline, enabling us to meet IEA's net zero goal, at least from our sector's perspective, and delivering energy access to an increasing number of the over a billion who do not have access today, with the estimates here of improved food security. This is actually a pretty conservative estimate just from refrigeration, improved health outcomes. We've talked about the air pollution and the air quality. And so the co-benefits are immense. It's finally an overall a call to our community to move the goalposts to higher levels of ambition, to deliver access and climate minimization from our sector through a coherent, actionable plan for these 10 net zero heroes. And with that, I will close out the conversation for the presentation, not the conversation. I will start the conversation, kick it off. But I'm done presenting, Joyita.
Thanks so much, Christine. That was a lot to run through. Well done, bravo. And a lot to absorb. As people are absorbing that, I'm going to invite the panelists to say something. This 9.2 gigatons number just completely blew me away when I first read the report. It's massive. It's significant. So I'll start maybe, Axum, I'll come to you first, and then I'll come to the others as well. Just wanted to get a sense from you on what your takeaways were. Was there anything in the report that caught your eye or that you were surprised about, especially given that you work on cooling issues? But feel free to comment on anything else you want. So why don't we get started with you, and then I'll go to the others. Thanks.
Great. Firstly, congratulations to CLASP on publishing this very important report that spotlights the opportunities for both curbing emissions from key appliances and increasing access to these appliances that shape our modern world and improve quality of life. We think it's going to be a really valuable resource for the whole sector. Not surprising, but one observation is that 4 of the 10 appliances highlighted as net zero heroes are related to cooling, if we also count two-way heat pumps that can provide both heating and cooling functions. Currently, we know cooling equipment is responsible for more than 7% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions, and demand is expected to triple by mid-century. So without a switch to more efficient technologies, with climate-friendly refrigerants and a full renewable energy transition, cooling sector emissions could actually double by 2050. So the reality is that in a warming world, we have to increasingly find ways to keep cool, but do so in sustainable ways, such as highlighted by Christine, utilizing tools such as best practice MEPs and other ambition-raising drivers. So CLASP's report really highlights that it's not only possible, but essential to in tandem address both appliance efficiency and increased access to cooling, especially for those who are low income and heat vulnerable.
Thanks, Axum. I actually want to pull the string that you just put out, talking about, that's also one of the, magical qualities of the report, where we're talking about improving people's lives, improving access, while reducing emissions at the same time. So I want to bring this to you, Christine Eibs. Your organization's in the forefront of advocating for gender responsiveness and access in energy. And I'd like to understand sort of how you think about it. What about the report struck you? And anything in your experience in terms of strategies that has worked or not worked in improving equity and access to appliances in a more gender responsive way. Thanks.
One of the things that struck me about this very strong report was the fact that it's about access. And when we think about all of the appliances, they all require electricity. One of the comments in the chat was that the electric cooking targets are quite ambitious because you can't have electric cooking if, one, your household doesn't have access to electricity, and two, the grid doesn't have the capacity to provide that, and three, if it's still a fossil fuel-based grid, we're even in worse situation. So what struck me about the report was, one, its focus on demand versus supply, which is something that is really needing to be increased in our world of electricity and energy planning. Really looking at what do women and communities need as opposed to what technology is currently being pushed into the marketplace. And then secondly, the intersectionality of it, because in order for these appliances to be locked into a green grid, it needs to actually be incorporated into the NDCs and into the National Electrification Planning and into the mindset of the policymakers that this, number one, we need to ensure universal energy access, because without that, these appliances are moot. And then secondly, that it's being looked at holistically. And that's really what the SHINE campaign is focusing on. We're very much focused on the gender just energy transition. The report makes a statement about the just energy transition, and our work is really focused on ensuring that the just energy transition incorporates two things more deliberately and intentionally than it is today. One is the focus on gender, on the marginalized communities, and that's not just women, but that's all marginalized and vulnerable displaced communities. And then secondly, that it really is focused on new access. When you don't have electricity, what are you transitioning to? So we want to talk about electricity growth, and that growth really does need to be renewable. And then when you focus on that, then you focus on the demand side of what can the households, communities do with that electricity. So a long way of saying, I applaud the report. Intersectionality is key. We can't be focusing on these things in silos. And that's very much what SHINE is focused on as well. Intersectionality between energy, gender, development, and climate.
Christine, I really just want to emphasize too that that is one of the things we hoped to do with this report was to really bring this issue of equity into the fore in relationship to appliances, lighting, equipment. You know, we see these two communities, it's almost like two separate conversations, right? Yeah. Delivering energy access and delivering climate mitigation. And appliances really sit at the intersection. And I think for many of us, we take them for granted every day, right? You know, how many devices am I using right now to conduct this, right? My temperature is being regulated, my lighting, right? These are, I have IT. And so this is, I'm being enabled, right? To lead a productive, constructive life. And there is an equity issue in the fact that we have to both deliver these devices for people's lives and improvement and manage the climate. We have to walk and chew gum at the same time. And so one of the goals of the report was to try to make that clear and put it in one place. And so I appreciate it. And I think obviously the issue of justice and gender justice and the justice for marginalized communities, if the solution is to just, meet our climate goals by continuing to not get that equity, to not get that access. That's not a just transition for anyone. And so we hope that we can bring these communities to a common understanding that we have to tackle both goals with the paper.
Agreed.
Thanks, Christine, for emphasizing that. I actually think this is a good way to maybe go to Oliver next, because your organization works on advocating for the interests of consumers, all consumers, men and women. And so again, I'd like to get your reactions to the findings of the report. And if you're able to, it would be good to hear from you what, in your view, has worked in terms of advocating for access to appliances. What kinds of programs, who are the parties involved, what makes successful, equitable access possible?
Thanks, Joyita, and totally agree with what both Christines were just saying. And I would add, it's about a just transition, a gender just transition, yes, but for us also, and for everyone, a consumer just transition. And for me, reading the report, the really striking thing, well, there were a lot of striking things, but it was the 7 gigatons, the modeling you've done on the best global benchmarks. These are policies that in some cases are purely aspirational, haven't even been put into practice by governments anywhere in the world. Even with those, we're falling short of our net zero ambitions by 7 gigatons by 2050. And this makes me think, well, what does this mean for consumers who, as you say, Christine, depend on appliances to heat, power, cool their homes, to get around, to do the basic tasks of daily life? And that means understanding that this is about consumer rights. This is about understanding that in many cases, consumers do not have the choice, do not have a realistic choice for a more efficient option, or to electrify, for example. And in many cases, they're being misinformed. It's 8 years since the Dieselgate scandal broke, which showed 11 million cars around the world fitted with illegal software hiding how much they were really polluting. And still, our members, consumer organizations, are fighting for adequate compensation for consumers. So yes, it's a gender just, but also a consumer just transition. And Joyita, you asked about some of the kind of best strategies, programs, and it would be hard to encapsulate everything. But one of the things that we find and our members find works really well is looking all the way across a consumer journey. So if this is about the demand side and galvanizing the demand side, it's not just about information, making consumers aware of the options. It's about investment, giving them access to financing. It's about installation, giving them access to trusted installers and suppliers that are going to help them in a streamlined way. It's about helping them use, maintain solutions and seek redress in the case of things going wrong, as in the case of Dieselgate. So those solutions, and we actually have a report coming out on this next week, which would recommend you to read alongside CLASP brilliant report, is to look all the way across the journey at those one-stop shop or integrated interventions that try to intervene at different points along that journey.
Thank you, Oliver. That's very interesting. Did you give us the name of your report, or you can maybe post it somewhere for everyone to see? And actually, this sets up very nicely to bring in Duncan, both to answer the overall question on what you thought was most interesting, or in the report. But everything Axum and Christine Eibs Singer and Oliver and Christine Egan said, it seems like there's a real role here for a coordinated response from very many different actors. And of course, the role of government and regulation, stands front and center on all of this. So a little bit of your reaction to the findings, but also a sense of, in order for efficiency and electrification to take root, what are some of the lessons you've learned? What are the push points that we need to advocate and push for? Thanks.
Thank you for the question. It's always nice to go last, I guess, because you get to sort of reflect on all the interesting points everyone else has been making, and I agree with all of them. A lot of them have been similar ideas that I had reading the report as well, especially the focus on cooling. Efficiency of appliances is obviously an incredibly important topic. I remember reading about this in a report from the IEA about 5 years ago, The Future of Cooling, where they pointed out that yes, increasing wealth in the global south means more access to cooling, which is a good thing. This is higher quality of living. Yet the most bought appliances, the cheapest appliances, are the worst performing. And they identified this rightly back then as a huge issue. I don't know how much progress is being made on that so far. So a big takeaway for me is not only do you have to make appliances in general more efficient, but also make sure you're deploying the most efficient appliances. I think this is something that the report highlights really well. So that's one thought that came to me, just to add on. Another one is that as in highlighting these net zero heroes, it provides very important guideposts to the type of appliances that are needed to cover all different parts of the energy sector, meaning that policymakers know what to prioritize in terms of appliances, and they also know what kind of infrastructure might be needed. This has been made a little bit in the Q&A with someone who was asking a question about electric cooking, which I don't necessarily agree with, but the point on the grid impacts is key. And this is something we hear about our work on heat pumps quite a bit, is what's going to happen on a very, very cold day when you have 80% heat pumps. And these are things that can be dealt with. We've seen different modeling exercises, but they're real challenges that take time. And as Oliver also mentioned, take investment and need to be understood up front. So this type of report really feeds into that discussion in a very positive way, I find. So let's see, I could take this in many different directions based on your question. Christine, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to just join in and just emphasize one of the things that the report does is there is a call to action to multiple stakeholders, because we know this isn't a problem that's going to be solved by the action of any individual group, right? And so there is a call to policymakers on whom, you know, there is a substantial burden to be achieving and pursuing ambitious policy, right? And the fundamental call of the report is even more ambition is required. There is a call to industry. There's a call to manufacturers. Many of these companies have corporate commitments and are, you know, globally aligned. And there are choices that get made about what gets produced and what gets sold at what levels of efficiency and where it gets distributed. I'll call attention to another CLASP report. Maybe one of my colleagues can put it in the chat that we did recently about dumping of inefficient air conditioners in Southeast Asia, right? And these are products that wouldn't even be accepted in industry's domestic markets, right? But they're finding their way to unregulated markets in the economies with obvious, you know, as you know, people are taking up their first air conditioner and in fact, you know, buying a relatively inefficient product and locked in for 10 to 12 years, right? So, and so that is an example. There's action that could be taken there. There is a call to consumer protection groups. I agree 100% with Oliver. There is a consumer protection perspective here. Actually, I would say that the demand for energy efficient, high quality appliances is something that, you know, maybe we've underinvested in partnership with consumer groups, because it is absolutely essential, and we need to join forces to create global momentum. As I said, we will need a network, we will need a stakeholder, we will need a collaborative approach, a universe of actors working to solve this problem. And it's one of the things we hope is achieved with the report, which is an alert, a call to action, a call to participation to those multiple groups.
Well said, Christine. This is, you know, at this point, this is kind of an open conversation. I just want to check in with Corinne. Are there any questions? Sorry, I have not been looking at the questions, just been listening to the conversation. Corinne, help me out and let me know if there are any questions that still need to be answered from the participants. And I'm happy to
Hi, Joyita. We're kind of taking them one by one. Actually, a lot of them are a bit more technical in nature. So I think we're good.
Joyita, if I could just jump in, because we've talked a lot about the mitigation and emissions reduction, which is huge, no question. But the report also talks about adaptation and resilience. And I'd like to just go there for a moment. I don't know, there's a report that GOGLA released back during the climate summit back in September, and I can put it into the chat, that really focused on power adaptation and resilience through off-grid solutions. And it was related to climate justice. And it really very much reinforces these two reports are just almost like two ends of two bookends, right? That report really set up the fact that through off-grid solar, bringing new access through off-grid solar solutions with the same similar types of appliances, you could achieve, you know, steps towards adaptation and mitigation. It was cooling, it was motors. It was very similar, and the areas of impact were aligned with what the CLASP report, the Net Heroes report, says. And here again, I think it's just really important for us to reflect on the fact that we need electricity access. We need to be, one of the statements in the report was that we've underinvested in the demand side, or the consumer side, if you will. And that's very much what I think when we start focusing about justice, gender justice, climate justice, equity, it's really very much flipping it on its head and saying, what's needed to ensure access to electricity, access to energy efficient appliances? What are the policies and the financing streams? And when you start looking at that, and I'm going to be repeating myself, it's intersectionality. You know, one of the things I often talk about with my energy access colleagues is we have to stop talking to ourselves, because we talk within this energy finance, you know, only people who are financing energy. Part of the reason SHINE expanded is because the reality is financing into energy access is in a state of drought. And we needed to expand that and make the case to those who are interested in development, those who are interested in gender justice, and of course, those who are interested in climate, and start to make the arguments, which this report makes, that when you look at energy and its use, what it enables, you get equity and climate solutions. And so I just wanted to re-emphasize that what's so important here is this issue of demand, understanding, and this goes to Oliver's work on consumers, understanding what the consumer needs, and whether that's technology, information, finance, and then looking across sectors to see how we package it. And that's really hard, because we're really based at a point where we're so siloed. You know, we talk about cooling over here, we talk about energy access over here, and then there's electric cooking. And the reality is we have 700 million people now who don't have access to electricity. So saying electric pressure cookers is out there unless we start integrating intentionally and deliberately.
Thank you, Christine, for that intervention. That was helpful, useful, and really, in a way, what strikes me is part of what makes this so powerful a pathway is the ubiquity, to use the word that Christine kept using. It's just the presence of appliance everywhere at all times for all people. And that's what makes it so powerful, but that's also what makes it so complex, because there are so many parts of intervention that all are touch points that need to act together. But what is good about the report is it starts to show these pieces, and it's really nice to have all your voices in this discussion, because you are exactly the groups that are working on are coming at it from different points of view. So this has been really helpful to me, certainly, and eye-opening to me. I guess for me, what I'd like to understand is, as some of you or all of you may be heading off to COP and discussions, is there a takeaway in the sense that, is there a platform that exists already that can bring some of this stuff together? How can we push this agenda? I'm just putting this out there for all of you. So let me know if you want to put your hands up or whatever, who wants to go first or last. What might be some ways for us to break these silos that Christine was referring to, and coordinate across industry group and business and government and financiers and consumer interest groups and so on and so forth? Are there new platforms that need to be built, or are they there and we just need to push on them harder?
I'd love to jump in, Jayita. And this has been such a rich conversation. I think we could go on for hours really to dig in. But I will raise Clean Cooling Collaborative, my organization, and I think those represented on this panel and in the audience, some are members of this group called the Cool Coalition, based out of UNEP. And they have been working with the UAE COP28 presidency to actually, over the past many months, develop a global cooling pledge that's going to offer a comprehensive set of commitments around the transition to low emissions, hopefully to no emissions later this century, cooling and increasing access to efficient climate-friendly cooling, especially for those who are in most need of it. And they'll be launching this pledge, and national, subnational governments can sign on, as well as the private sector and non-state actors. So I'd say look out for that. That's going to launch on December 5th at COP. And again, it's open to sign on or provide a letter of support, and lays out concrete things we can all do in this intersectional way around cooling, as well as, of course, trying to really look at implementation of the various strategies laid out in this CLASP report.
Yeah, and that's great, Axum. And I want to just join in too and say, just picking up on a little bit on one of the threads as we approach closing out, which is that, this report highlights 10 net zero heroes, 10 devices, 10 products and technology areas, right? But obviously on a global basis, these need to be deployed in ways that are customized to local context, right? So for example, to the cooking comment that came up, we're obviously not saying we're going to go to induction cooking in most of the world, right? There are different cooking solutions in different places, but the point is to clean and give equitable products that provide quality of life across it's to solve this very complex problem through these technologies in local and customized ways. And so as we think about what that means, to Joyita's point of how we're going out into the world, that the COP, we are hoping to take this report to the COP as the beginning of a dialogue. The comms team can tell you we have a very robust agenda of events, where I will be and others on the team will be talking about these results and trying to create momentum. And then frankly, you'll be hearing from us over the course of the next year. The idea is to implement and to live this report over the next year, to not just write it and be one and done, but to disseminate it, to talk with the various stakeholders around it and try to create. And so for all of you on the panel, as you see fora, as you see areas where we can take the message of this and turn it into implementation, we're very open to partnership there. Oliver, I'm thinking about what does it mean to partner with your organization to really make sure that consumer voice is present. And so this is something that we intend to live and breathe, and really try to be driving change through, particularly around this unified message that it is a mitigation, adaptation, resilience solution, and that we have to do all of these at once, and that anything else is unjust, that we must address an equitable solution to these combined problems. And so I just want to know that I look forward to partnership, and both at the COP and ahead, you can expect to hear more from us, and more requests for partnership with you and your teams, for how we implement to a successful and ambitious set of solutions.
Thanks, Christine. I think we're approaching the end of time, but I just wanted to give the other panelists a chance if they wanted to come in, either to address this question or just some new thoughts, anything you wanted to share with the audience. And then with your permission, I will start closing out.
If I could just jump in very quickly, and, Christine, Eibs said there's, we need something which is crossing sectors and the usual silos. And I would suggest that the consumer, and I would suggest this, but I would suggest that it is the consumer, because, we don't go about our lives thinking, what is the cooling solution for me? What is the heating? We think, how am I going to heat and cool my home? How am I going to get around? People's lives, we integrate sectors and silos all the time. So how can we talk to consumers, support them in a way that does that? So we need to do the work upstream to make that happen. And I'm thrilled that CLASP will be coming to Nairobi next week for Consumers International's Global Congress, which is the main gathering of consumer advocates from around the world. And so we can start off your year of collaboration and action on appliances.
Thanks, Oliver. Corin, let me do a quick check to see if there are any new questions that came up that need to be addressed, or should we start closing things out?
Let's start closing things out. Thank you so much.
Okay. So thank you, our brilliant panelists, for a fantastic discussion. I certainly have learned a lot. I remain excited about this report. I think you guys just can take this to the COP and beyond. It's a call for action for all of us. And the world will be better off because of it and the actions that we're going to take from it. So congratulations, Team CLASP. Congratulations, team panelists, for the work that you do. And I hope this is the beginning of forging actions and relationships to carry this agenda forward. Thank you all for your participation. And thank you to all of the participants for making this possible. Goodbye from us for now.
Best of luck in COP.
All the very best. Bye-bye.